A little girl waited 3 days outside a fancy noodle shop, refusing to move, because her mother promised to return. When a wealthy stranger finally stopped to listen, he uncovered a truth far more painful than abandonment, and a promise that would change all their lives forever. The rain in downtown Seattle didn't fall hard. It lingered, a thin, patient drizzle that never quite stopped, as if the city itself was holding its breath. Under the narrow awning of Elan, a fancy noodle shop glowing warm behind glass, a little girl sat perfectly still on a wooden bench. Her feet didn't reach the ground. They swung slightly, not in play, but from the discomfort of staying still for too long. Her name was Lila Quinn, 6.5 years old, and she had been there before the lights turned on, before the dinner rush, before the rain changed its mind and decided not to. She hugged a small, worn teddy bear to her chest. One button eye, one threadbare ear. She had named him Blink because he looks like he's blinking all the time. Inside the restaurant, laughter spilled like wine. Plates clinked. Music hummed softly, carefully calibrated to sound expensive. Lila watched it all through the glass. She didn't knock. She didn't ask. She didn't cry. Every so often she leaned forward and pressed her fingers against the cold window just for a second, then pulled them back and rubbed them together to keep warm. A hostess had offered her hot chocolate earlier. A waiter had brought her a sandwich. Someone had asked if she was lost. Lila had answered the same way every time. My mom said she'd come back. She looked down at the exact spot beneath her shoes, as if it were marked on a map only she could see. She told me to wait right here. The rain soaked her sneakers. The night grew colder, but Lila didn't move. Because if she moved, her mother might come back and not find her. Callum Vance stepped out of his car and adjusted the collar of his coat without thinking. He always did that. A small, precise movement, the kind a man makes when his life is built on control. At 44, Callum owned 5 high-end restaurants across Seattle. Elan was the crown jewel, his most profitable, most praised, most photographed. He didn't need to visit every night. He had managers, systems, reports delivered before sunrise. But routine had become his armor. So every evening he came anyway. The valet greeted him by name. The back door opened quietly. The kitchen staff nodded, respectful but not nervous. Everything was running exactly as it should. Inside the dining room, amber lights glowed over perfectly spaced tables. Conversations floated at just the right volume. A couple laughed too loudly. A sommelier corrected a pour with subtle elegance. Callum scanned for problems. A table waiting too long. A server moving too fast. A detail out of place. That was when he saw her. Not inside. Outside. A small shape beneath the awning, barely visible through the rain-streaked glass. Callum paused. "Who's that?" he asked quietly, pointing. The manager followed his gaze and sighed. "Oh, the little girl. Little girl, she's been sitting there for days. Days." The word landed wrong. "We tried talking to her," the manager added quickly. "Offered food, called support services. She runs when strangers approach. Says she's waiting for her mom." Callum felt an unfamiliar tightness in his chest. He didn't like scenes at the door of his restaurants. He didn't like unresolved things. But this wasn't irritation. It was something older, something buried. The rain outside thickened. And without telling anyone where he was going, Callum turned toward the entrance. The cold hit Callum immediately when he stepped outside. It smelled like wet pavement and winter that hadn't fully arrived yet. He approached slowly, careful not to startle her. The girl looked up before he spoke. Large eyes, alert, not afraid, just cautious. "Hi," Callum said, stopping a few steps away. "It's cold out here, I know," she replied. Her voice was steady, too steady for someone so small. Callum hesitated. Children were unfamiliar territory. No contracts, no rules, he understood. "I'm Callum," he said finally. "This restaurant belongs to me." She nodded as if filing the information away. I'm Lila. I'm 6.5. The half matters, she added. Callum almost smiled. What are you doing out here, Lila? She tightened her arms around the teddy bear. Waiting. For who, my mom? And where is she? Lila pointed directly beneath her shoes. She said to wait right here. Callum glanced at the empty sidewalk, the rain, the passing cars. She's been gone a while, Lila counted silently on her fingers. 1, 2, 3. She looked up again. 3 days. A pause. If I go somewhere else, she continued carefully, she might come back and not find me. There was no drama in her voice. No fear, just logic. Callum swallowed. Are you hungry sometimes? Lila said. But it's okay. Blink doesn't need much. She lifted the bear slightly as if to reassure him. Callum looked at the bench, the awning, the exact spot she refused to leave. Something inside him shifted. Lila, he said gently. What if we found a warmer place to wait just for tonight? She shook her head immediately. I can't. Why not? Her answer was quiet, unbreakable. Because promises only work if you stay. And for the first time that night, Callum Vance didn't know what to say. Callum followed Lila's gaze to the ground beneath her shoes. It was just wet concrete. No mark, no sign. Yet to her it was a boundary as real as a locked door. That's the exact spot, he asked gently. Lila nodded. She said not to move, even if it rains. The rain chose that moment to grow heavier. A drop slid from the edge of the awning and landed on Lila's sleeve. She didn't flinch. She only pulled Blink closer as if the bear could absorb the cold for her. Callum glanced back at the restaurant behind him. Inside, people were warm, safe, fed, laughing over choices on a menu that cost more than some families spent in a week. Outside, a child was guarding a promise. Did your mom say how long she'd be gone? Callum asked. Lila thought for a moment. She said she had to fix something important. Important like work, important like grown-up problems, Lila replied seriously. The kind kids can't help with. That answer unsettled him more than any crying would have. Callum crouched down so they were closer to eye level, keeping his hands visible, non-threatening. Lila, he said softly. If your mom came back right now and saw you inside warm and safe, do you think she'd be upset? Lila frowned. Not because she disagreed, because she was thinking. She'd be happy I wasn't cold, Lila admitted. Then her face fell again. But she might think I didn't listen. The rain soaked deeper into her shoes. Her toes had gone numb, but she didn't mention it. Somewhere in Callum's chest, something old and locked stirred awake. Because he knew that kind of fear. The fear that love disappears the moment you stop obeying. Callum noticed the small details once he sat beside her. The way Lila's coat was too big, the sleeves rolled up twice. The careful knots in her shoelaces retied many times. The way Blink's single button eye had been stitched back on by a hand that tried very hard. What's his name? Callum asked. Blink, Lila said. Because he never really closes his eyes. That's a good thing to have, Callum replied. Someone who stays awake. Lila smiled at that. I'm 6.5, she repeated, just in case he'd forgotten. The half matters, Callum said back. Her smile grew wider, quick, and surprised. Do you sleep out here? He asked, choosing his words carefully. Lila hesitated, then nodded. Over there. She pointed to a narrow corner between the wall and the bench. Blink watches. Callum pictured the cold concrete, the passing footsteps, the night stretching on while the city slept. Do you get scared? He asked quietly. Lila shook her head. No. Because Mom's coming back. There it was again. Not hope. Certainty. A waitress stepped outside to smoke. Glanced at them, then quickly looked away, respecting the bubble Callum had unknowingly built around the child. Have you eaten today? Callum asked. Lila counted again on her fingers. Once. But it's okay. I don't get very hungry when I'm waiting. Callum didn't answer immediately. He was thinking about how small bodies learn to ignore big needs. Lila, he said at last. What if Blink got sick from the cold? Lila looked down at the bear. Her fingers tightened. He is cold, she whispered. And just like that, the invisible line beneath her feet began to crack. Okay, Lila said suddenly. Just for a little bit. Callum didn't move right away. He knew better than to rush a moment like this. But Lila added quickly, lifting a finger. We have to leave a note. A big one. A very big one, Callum agreed. They went inside the restaurant together. Conversations paused not from suspicion but from instinct. People sensed something fragile passing through. The hostess handed them paper and a pen. Lila drew first. A small stick figure with long hair. Another even smaller one holding a bear. A roof above them both. Can you write? Lila asked. I can read, but writing takes longer. Callum nodded and wrote exactly what she said, word for word. Mom, I went somewhere warm with Mr. Callum. I stayed close. Please come get me when you can. I'm still waiting. Love, Lila. Callum added his phone number and the restaurant's name underneath. Is that okay? He asked. Lila read it carefully, lips moving with each word. She nodded. They taped the note to the glass door right at adult eye level. So she'll see it fast, Lila said. Outside, the rain continued to fall. But for the first time in 3 days, Lila stepped away from the exact spot beneath her shoes. She slipped her small hand into Callum's. He felt the weight of it immediately. Not heavy, just important. The building didn't look warm from the outside. Harbor House Temporary Shelter sat quietly between two taller structures, its sign small, its windows protected, but painted with soft colors meant to comfort rather than explain. Lila held Callum's hand the entire walk from the car to the door. Not tightly, just enough to know he was still there. Inside, the air smelled like clean soap and old books. A woman with kind eyes and silver-streaked hair crouched to Lila's height. Hi, sweetheart. I'm Rosa, she said gently. You must be Lila. Lila nodded, hiding half her face behind Blink. That's a very brave bear, Rosa added without hesitation. Blink was immediately trusted. Paperwork followed. Quiet questions, calm voices, everything done carefully, slowly, by the rules. Callum signed where indicated, answering only what was necessary. No shortcuts, no favors pulled. Rosa showed Lila a small room with pale yellow walls and 3 little beds. Just for tonight, Rosa explained. And tomorrow, we'll see. Lila absorbed the room without reacting. Then she turned to Callum. You're coming back, she asked. Yes, he answered. Tomorrow. She considered this. You came out, she said finally. So I think you will. That sentence stayed with him. As Rosa led Lila inside, the child suddenly broke free and wrapped her arms around Callum's leg. Thank you for not making me choose, she whispered. Callum froze, then rested a hand gently on her shoulder. You did all the choosing, he said. I just listened. When he left Harbor House, the rain had stopped, but the silence felt heavier than the storm. Callum's penthouse greeted him with perfect stillness. No voices, no movement, no misplaced objects. Everything exactly where it was supposed to be. He loosened his tie and poured a drink he didn't touch. Instead, he stood by the window and watched the city lights flicker on one by one. Somewhere Lila was settling into a bed that wasn't hers, hugging Blink like a shield. She said you came out. The words echoed. Callum closed his eyes. A memory surfaced, not dramatic, not loud. Just a boy sitting on steps watching the sky change colors, while holding on to a promise that grew thinner with each hour. He had learned early how waiting could harden into silence. That night, sleep came late. The next day, Callum returned to Harbor House because he was nearby. The day after that, too. Lila didn't run to him. She didn't cry. She simply looked up, smiled once, and went back to coloring. Trust, he realized, didn't arrive loudly. It arrived quietly, then stayed to see if you would leave. He brought a new teddy bear on the third visit. 2 eyes, soft fur. This one needs a name, he said. Lila studied it seriously. Pocket, she decided, because he's small enough to keep close. Blink remained in charge. They sat together while Lila drew. Sometimes they talked, sometimes they didn't. One afternoon, Lila asked without looking up. Do grown-ups forget promises on purpose? Callum answered honestly. Sometimes they forget because they're scared. Lila nodded, accepting this. My mom isn't scared, she said. She's just late. And Callum realized something frightening. Lila wasn't learning hope from him. He was learning it from her. It was a drawing that changed everything. Lila handed it to Callum on the 4th day. This is my mom, she said proudly. The picture showed a woman with brown hair tied back, holding a mop. A gold shape hovered above her head like a crown. She works in a hotel, Lila explained. The one with the shiny crown sign. Callum's breath caught. Do you know the name? He asked gently. Lila shook her head. But it smells like soap, and she works very hard. Rosa, standing nearby, froze for half a second. That sounds like the Grand Regent, she said carefully. Callum thanked her and tucked the drawing into his jacket as if it were something valuable. That night, he made a call he hadn't planned to make. Mason Crow, he said when the line connected. I need help finding someone. Who? Mason asked. A mother, Callum replied. And the truth. The investigation didn't feel like charity. It felt necessary. Days passed. Callum kept visiting. Lila kept waiting. One afternoon, she looked up and asked if my mom can't come back yet. Will you still stay? Callum didn't answer right away. Then he said yes. Not because he felt heroic, but because leaving no longer felt possible. And somewhere beyond paperwork and procedures and unanswered questions, a promise was quietly being formed. Not spoken, but chosen. Callum didn't tell Lila about the investigation. Not yet. Children didn't need to carry the weight of adult urgency. They carried enough already. Instead, he listened. He listened to how Lila talked about her mother, as if time were flexible, as if days didn't stack into weeks, as if love could stretch without breaking. My mom always looks back before she leaves, Lila said one afternoon, coloring slowly. Even if she's late, she looks back. Why does she do that? Callum asked. So I know she didn't forget me. The sentence lodged somewhere deep inside him. Callum met Mason Crow that evening in a quiet office that smelled like old paper and coffee gone cold. Mason didn't waste words. He asked clear questions and waited for honest answers. A 6-year-old waiting alone doesn't happen without a reason, Mason said. Either abandonment or something interrupted. I don't believe she left, Callum replied. Belief isn't evidence, Mason said gently. But it's a place to start. They traced Serena Quinn's life backward. Short-term apartments, consistent rent payments, a steady work record, no pattern of disappearance. She was building something fragile but real, Mason said. People don't walk away from that. At Harbor House, Lila waited. Not anxiously, not loudly. She waited the way people wait when they trust the world to behave. One evening, as Callum walked her back from the playroom, she stopped suddenly. If my mom can't come back yet, she asked quietly, does that mean I did something wrong? Callum knelt in front of her. No, he said firmly. It means the world sometimes moves slower than promises. She nodded, absorbing it carefully. Then she reached into her pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. It was the note they had taped to the restaurant door. I keep it with me, she said. Just in case. Callum looked at the handwriting. I'm still waiting. And for the first time, the weight of that waiting pressed hard against his chest. The call came on a Tuesday afternoon. Callum, Mason said, voice low. I found something. They met at the same office. Mason placed a tablet on the desk and turned it slowly. Security footage, grainy, distant, ordinary. A woman crossing the street, a child holding her hand, Serena and Lila. Mason paused the video. 3 days before the girl was found, he said. The footage resumed. The moment wasn't dramatic. No slow motion, no sound. Just a sudden interruption. A blur of movement. Serena pushing the child forward away from danger. The next frames showed chaos, people stopping, someone calling for help. The child small, confused, standing up, and then moving out of frame. She ran, Mason said quietly. Likely scared. Likely went to the last place she remembered feeling safe. Callum couldn't breathe, and the mother he asked. Hospital. Admitted without identification. Unconscious. Still there. The words settled slowly, heavily. She didn't leave. She never left. Callum stared at the paused image of Serena mid-step, her body angled toward her child. She kept her promise, he whispered. Yes, Mason said. She did. Callum stood abruptly. I need to see her, Callum, Mason cautioned. There are procedures, legal steps. I'll follow them, Callum replied. Everyone. At Harbor House that evening, Lila sensed something had changed. You look different, she said. How, Callum asked. Like when the lights come on before it stops raining. He didn't tell her yet, but he stayed longer. And for the first time, Lila didn't ask if he was coming back tomorrow. She already knew. The hospital was quiet in a way Harbor House wasn't. Clean, controlled, removed. Callum followed Dr. Harper Lynn through white corridors, signing forms, answering questions. She's stable, the doctor explained. Still unconscious, but we're hopeful. Hope. The word sounded different now. Callum stood beside Serena Quinn's bed and saw a woman who looked smaller than in Lila's drawings, but just as real. You did everything right, he said softly, though she couldn't hear him. Your daughter waited. Later that day, Callum returned to Harbor House. Rosa nodded when she saw his face. You found her. Yes, Callum said. She's alive. Rosa exhaled slowly. How will you tell Lila carefully? They sat together in a quiet room. Rosa stayed nearby as protocol required. Callum took Lila's hands. Your mom didn't leave you, he said gently. She was hurt. She's been getting help. Lila didn't cry. She went very still. So, I waited, right? She asked. Yes, Callum said, voice steady. You waited exactly right. Her shoulders sagged, not with fear, but with release. She's coming back, Lila said. She's trying, Callum replied, and we'll help her. Lila leaned forward and rested her forehead against his chest. Blink fell to the floor. Callum held her not tightly, not dramatically, just enough. And in that quiet room, something healed. Not finished, but finally moving. For the first time since Callum had met her, Lila didn't ask when her mother was coming back. She knew now that the answer existed somewhere beyond waiting, but that didn't make the waiting disappear. At Harbor House, days settled into a fragile rhythm. Breakfast at the same table, coloring in the same corner, evening stories read by volunteers with gentle voices. Lila followed the routine carefully, as if structure itself were a kind of protection. Callum came every afternoon. Sometimes he brought books, sometimes fruit. Once he brought nothing at all and just sat beside her while she drew. You don't have to bring things, Lila told him one day. You already come. That sentence stayed with him. At night, Callum spoke to Serena at the hospital. He told her about the drawings taped to the walls of her room, about Blink and Pocket, about how Lila still corrected people when they forgot the half in her age. You raised a very strong child, he said quietly. The doctor warned him not to expect immediate change. Healing took time. Some things couldn't be rushed, no matter how much money or care surrounded them. Callum understood that more than most. One afternoon, Rosa pulled him aside. "She's holding it together very well," Rosa said. "Sometimes too well." Callum looked through the glass at Lila sitting alone, arranging crayons by color. "What does that mean?" he asked. "It means she's being brave," Rosa replied. "But bravery isn't the same as safety. At some point the feelings come." As if summoned by the words, Lila looked up and saw Callum watching her. She smiled. Just a small one. Later, while walking down the hallway together, Lila suddenly stopped. "Can I ask you something?" she said. "Of course. If my mom wakes up, will she know I waited?" Callum knelt to her level. "Yes," he said. "She'll know. And if she doesn't wake up yet?" Lila asked carefully. Callum chose his words the way one handles glass. "Then we keep taking care of you. Together." Lila nodded, satisfied for now. But that night, after lights out, she cried quietly into her pillow. Not loudly, not desperately. Just enough for the feelings to finally breathe. The call came after midnight. Rosa's voice was calm but serious. "Callum, I think you should come." Callum didn't ask why. He arrived to find Lila sitting upright on her bed. Blink clutched tightly. Her eyes were red but dry. The kind of red that came from trying not to cry. "I had a bad dream," she said when she saw him. "But I don't think it was really a dream," Rosa explained softly. Lila had woken up disoriented, asking if she had missed her mother coming back. No panic, no screaming, just quiet confusion. Callum sat beside her, careful not to crowd. "Do you want to tell me about it?" he asked. Lila stared at the wall. "In my dream," she said slowly, "I wasn't on the bench anymore. I was somewhere else. And Mom came back. But she didn't see me." Callum felt his chest tighten. "What did you do?" he asked. "I tried to be smaller," Lila whispered, "so I wouldn't be in the way. That did it." The tears came not in a flood, but in waves that shook her small shoulders. She pressed her face into Callum's jacket without asking. Callum wrapped his arms around her, grounding steady. Rosa stayed close as required, but didn't interrupt. "You don't ever have to be smaller," Callum said quietly. "Not for anyone." Lila cried harder then. "I waited." She sobbed. "I waited and waited and waited. I didn't move. I listened. I did everything right." "I know," Callum said. "You did." "What if waiting isn't enough?" she asked, her voice breaking. Callum didn't answer right away. Then he said the truth, the safest one he knew. "Waiting isn't what kept you safe. People did. And I'm one of them now." Lila pulled back slightly, eyes searching his face. "You're staying," she said. "Not a question." "Yes," Callum replied. That night, Lila fell asleep, holding his sleeve, and Callum stayed until morning. The next day, Callum spoke with Rosa, a social worker, and his lawyer. Not to bend rules, but to follow them. Temporary care, background checks, home evaluation, clear timelines, clear boundaries, everything documented, transparent, lawful. When Callum returned to Lila, she was sitting cross-legged on the floor, drawing 3 figures holding hands. "Is this about me?" she asked, noticing the seriousness in his expression. "Yes," he said. "And it's important." He sat across from her. "Lila, your mom is still healing," he began. "She needs time, and until she's ready, you need a place that's steady." Lila nodded slowly. "I was wondering," Callum continued, his voice steady but careful, "if you would like to stay with me for a while. Just until your mom can take care of you again." Lila didn't answer immediately. She looked around the room. At the beds, at the walls, at Rosa standing nearby. Then she looked back at Callum. "Would it be like a visit?" she asked. "Yes." "And I can still see Mom?" she asked. "Every chance we get. And Blink and Pocket come too," she added. "They're part of the deal." Callum smiled. Lila considered this very seriously. Finally, she said, "Okay. But only if you promise something." "What's that?" That if you ever can't stay, you tell me. You don't disappear. Callum felt the weight of the promise settle in his chest. I promise, he said. I won't disappear. Lila nodded. Then very gently she leaned forward and hugged him. Not tightly, not desperately, just like someone choosing trust carefully. And in that quiet room surrounded by rules and forms and adult responsibilities, something unmistakable happened. A child stopped waiting, and a man finally chose to stay. The paperwork didn't feel romantic. It felt heavy, necessary, like a bridge built plank by plank over a drop you weren't allowed to look down. Callum met with Rosa, the assigned caseworker, and his attorney in a quiet office where the chairs were too stiff and the coffee tasted like nothing. They talked about background checks, temporary guardianship, school registration, transport, safety, emergency contacts, every detail that made the difference between a heartfelt promise and a protected reality. Callum signed everything without hesitation, not because he wanted to win Lila, because he wanted her to be safe in a way that didn't depend on luck. When the social worker scheduled a home visit, Callum didn't try to charm anyone. He didn't mention his net worth. He didn't offer favors. He simply answered questions like a man finally learning that love required structure. His penthouse, for the first time in years, looked like someone had asked it a question it couldn't ignore. Where does a child sit to put on shoes? Where do small hands reach for cups? Where do crayons go when someone stops coloring mid-thought? Callum walked through his own home as if it belonged to a stranger, seeing sharp edges, echoing rooms, glass tables that looked beautiful and uninviting. By the next morning, he was in a bookstore buying children's stories, older classics, gentle adventures, anything with hope that didn't feel fake. Then he stood in a toy aisle staring at boxes like they were written in another language. When the cashier asked if it was for his niece, Callum paused. Yes, he said finally. It was easier than explaining a truth still taking shape. The room he chose for Lila was the one with the best morning light. He didn't paint it bright like a cartoon. He painted it warm, soft yellow like a promise you could breathe inside. He replaced heavy curtains with lighter ones. He brought in a smaller bed with a quilt covered in tiny stars, a desk, a lamp, a jar of colored pencils. Nothing extravagant, just intentional. When Lila arrived, it wasn't dramatic. Rosa walked her in as required with calm professionalism. Lila held Blink in one arm and Pocket in the other. She carried a paper folder of drawings like it was a passport. Callum stood at the doorway, suddenly more nervous than he'd ever been opening a new restaurant. What if she hates it, he thought. What if she misses Harbor House? What if she misses the predictable safety of other children nearby, the staff who knew exactly how to speak in gentle tones? Lila stepped inside and didn't move. Her eyes traveled slowly over the room. The bed, the desk, the crayons. She reached out and touched the quilt with the tips of her fingers, as if it might vanish. Is this mine? She asked, voice small. Yes, Callum said. It's yours. Lila's shoulders rose in a careful inhale, then fell on a long exhale like she'd been holding air for days. She turned to Rosa as if checking if this was allowed. Rosa smiled. It's real, sweetheart. Lila walked to the desk, opened a drawer, and found a sketchbook Callum had placed there. She lifted it and looked back at him. You remembered the paper, she said. Callum swallowed. I tried. Lila nodded, satisfied. Then she did something that broke him in a quiet way. She placed Blink and Pocket side by side on the pillow, sat on the edge of the bed, and whispered to them like a commander giving orders. We live here for now, she told them. But we still wait the right way. Callum didn't correct her. He didn't say, you're done waiting, because he understood. Waiting had been her way of staying loyal. Now she needed a new way to be loyal, one that didn't require cold concrete and rain. That first evening, Callum made dinner himself. It was simple pasta, buttered breadfruit. He set the table like it mattered, because it did. Lila ate politely. Too politely. When she finished, she asked, "Do you lock the door?" "Yes," Callum said. "Can I see?" she asked. He showed her. The lock. The chain. The way it clicked into place. Lila nodded again, the way she did when her mind stored new rules. Later, as he read her a story, her eyelids fluttered. Right before sleep took her, she murmured, "You didn't disappear today." Callum paused mid-page. Then he kept reading, softly, steadily, like a man learning how to be the kind of safe he'd always needed. The first week was not a montage. It was a series of small adjustments, tiny negotiations between a child's cautious hope and a man's unfamiliar tenderness. Callum discovered that mornings had sound. Not just the hum of appliances, but the shuffle of small feet. The tap of crayons on a table. The very particular way a child could turn silence into something alive. Lila woke early, as if she didn't trust rest. The first morning, Callum found her sitting fully dressed on the bed, blink under one arm. "You're up," he said gently. Lila nodded. "I didn't want to miss Mom." Callum sat beside her without crowding. "We're going to see her today," he said. "After breakfast." Lila looked down at her hands. Okay. He made breakfast like someone following a recipe he couldn't read. Toast, cereal, milk, fruit. Lila ate slowly, eyes flicking toward the door between bites. When Callum asked if she wanted more, she said, "Maybe later." Not because she wasn't hungry, because she was measuring everything, how much space she was allowed to take, how much she was allowed to need. At school, Callum filled out forms, signed emergency contacts, spoke to counselors, made sure the adults understood Lila was safe, supervised, protected, and not to be treated like a spectacle. He didn't tell a dramatic story. He gave facts. And then he asked quietly for kindness. In the afternoons, he picked her up himself. Lila would climb into the car and immediately ask hospital yes, he'd answer. They visited Serena at times, approved by staff. Rosa coordinated. The hospital team guided. Everything careful, legal, respectful. Lila brought a new drawing each visit. The drawings weren't masterpieces. They were evidence. A sun, a park. 3 stick figures. One tall figure in a suit always drawn a little to the side, as if Lila wasn't sure where to place him yet. Callum watched her stand by the bed and speak softly. "Hi, Mom. It's Lila. I'm warm now." Some days she talked about school, how her teacher had a bracelet that jingled, how the classroom smelled like crayons. Other days she talked to Serena as if nothing had changed. "I'm waiting," she'd say. "But I'm waiting inside now." Callum would stand back, hands folded, letting the moment belong to mother and daughter. But when Lila's voice wobbled, he stepped closer just enough to remind her she had an anchor. Evenings became their own new language. Callum learned that bedtime wasn't just a time. It was a test. On the third night, Lila asked, "Will you still be here when I wake up?" Callum didn't say always. He said what he could keep. "I'll be here in the morning," he promised, "and I'll tell you if I ever have to go somewhere." Lila watched him like a tiny judge. Then she nodded. That night, she left the bedroom door slightly open. Callum understood what that meant. Trust still fragile needed a crack of light. A week in, Callum found himself buying a small calendar and hanging it low enough for Lila to see. He wrote simple things in block letters. School, hospital, visit, story time. Lila stared at it for a long moment. "You wrote it down," she said. "So you don't have to hold it all in your head," Callum replied. Lila touched the paper with one fingertip. "Mom likes calendars," she said quietly. "She says they make time behave." That night, Callum sat alone after Lila fell asleep and realized something unsettling. He wasn't just keeping Lila safe. Lila was changing the architecture of his life, moving furniture inside his heart that had been locked for years. His phone buzzed with restaurant updates. He responded, delegated, pushed meetings away like crumbs. For the first time, he didn't feel guilty. For the first time, success didn't feel like the point. At the end of the week, Lila came into the kitchen holding Blink. She didn't say hello, she simply announced, "Blink says you're part of the waiting now." Callum smiled small real. "Tell Blink," he said, "I can handle that." And Lila, carefully like someone testing ice, laughed. It wasn't loud, but it was enough to make the room feel warmer. On the day everything shifted, the sky over Seattle was the color of pearl, still cloudy, but lighter. The city looked like it was trying. Callum picked Lila up from school early because her class had visited a science museum. She climbed into the car with a paper bag of souvenirs and a face that couldn't hold all its excitement. "I touched a rock from space," she declared proudly. "A meteorite." Callum smiled. "That's impressive." Lila pulled out a postcard of dinosaurs and turned it over and over in her hands. "Do you think Mom would like this?" "I think she'd love it," Callum said. They were halfway to the hospital when Callum's phone rang. "Dr. Harper Lynn," Callum answered immediately, turning his voice calm on instinct. "Mr. Vance," Dr. Lynn said. She sounded controlled, professional, but there was something different beneath it. A careful brightness. Callum's grip tightened on the steering wheel. "Is everything okay? I want you to come in as soon as you can," she said. Lila leaned forward in the back seat, listening with the full attention only children had. Callum kept his voice steady. "Did something change?" "Yes," Dr. Lynn replied. "She's awake." For a second, Callum didn't speak, as if words could break the moment. Serena Quinn regained consciousness, Dr. Lynn continued. "She's weak and confused as expected, but she's responsive." And the first thing she asked for, the doctor paused, the softest smile entering her voice, was her daughter. Callum swallowed. "We're coming." He ended the call and looked up in the mirror. Lila stared back at him, eyes wide, shining in a way that turned her whole face into light. "Mom," she whispered. Callum nodded once, carefully. "Yes. Your mom woke up?" Lila's breath left her like she'd been holding it her entire life. She pressed both hands to her mouth, then lowered them and whispered a sentence so quiet Callum almost missed it. "I knew it." He blinked. "You knew it?" Lila nodded, tears forming but not falling. "I knew she'd come back." Callum pulled the car over for a moment, not because he couldn't drive, but because he needed the world to stop spinning long enough for this to be real. He turned in his seat, keeping his voice gentle. "Lila, listen to me. Your mom is still healing. She might look different right now. There will be machines, people helping her. It's not scary, just medical." "Okay." Lila nodded rapidly. "Okay, I'll be careful. And we're going to do this the right way," Callum added. "Dr. Lynn said I should go in first to explain everything. Then you can come in with a nurse." Lila swallowed hard, trying to be brave the way she always was. "Can I make her a drawing right now?" she asked. Callum's throat tightened. "Yes," he said. "The best one." They arrived at the hospital and were guided to a small waiting room stocked with paper and markers. A nurse smiled kindly and placed a blank sheet in front of Lila. Lila didn't draw a castle or a rainbow first. She drew 3 stick figures, one tall, one medium, one small, and then after a long pause she drew a small bench under an awning. Callum watched quietly. "What's that?" he asked softly. Lila didn't look up. "That's where I waited," she said. "So she knows I kept my promise." Callum felt his eyes burn. He didn't wipe them. He let it happen, because tears weren't weakness. They were proof something inside him was finally alive. A nurse opened the door gently. "Mr. Vance," she said. "Dr. Lynn is ready for you." Callum stood. Lila held up the drawing. Her hands trembled. "Tell her I'm here," she whispered. Callum nodded. "I will." As he walked toward Serena's room, the corridor lights seemed brighter than they had ever been. Not because the hospital changed, because a little girl's hope kept alive through rain and waiting had finally found its answer. And Callum realized with a strange, steady awe, this wasn't the end. This was the beginning. Serena Quinn looked smaller awake than she ever had in Lila's drawings. Paler, fragile, surrounded by quiet machines doing their steady work. Callum stood beside the bed, unsure how to begin. "Your daughter is safe," he said first. "She's been waiting." Serena's eyes filled immediately. How long, she whispered. 3 days at the restaurant, then Harbor House, then with me. Her hand trembled as she covered her mouth. "I told her to wait," Serena said, voice breaking. "I told her I'd come back." "She believed you," Callum replied. "Every second." Tears slid silently down Serena's cheeks. Not guilt, not fear, but relief mixed with pain. "I never stopped trying," she whispered. "I pushed her away from the street. Then everything went dark." Callum nodded. She remembers the noise. And then waiting. Serena closed her eyes. "She must hate me." "No," Callum said firmly. "She trusts you." A nurse opened the door softly. "She's ready," the nurse said. Callum stepped aside. Lila entered slowly, holding her drawing with both hands. She stopped when she saw the wires, the bed, the unfamiliar stillness. Serena opened her arms carefully. "Lila," she whispered. Lila walked forward and asked, "Can I hug you?" Gently, Serena nodded, sobbing. Lila climbed onto the bed with careful movements and rested her head against her mother's shoulder. "You came back," Lila said simply. "I always will," Serena replied. Callum stood at the doorway, heart full and quiet. For the first time, the waiting was over. Recovery didn't happen all at once. It happened in mornings that felt heavy and afternoons that felt hopeful. Serena stayed in the hospital while Callum handled logistics the right way. Lawyers, social workers, medical approvals. Nothing rushed, nothing hidden. Lila stayed with Callum, temporarily visiting her mother every day. She brought drawings, stories, updates about school. "I'm warm," she told Serena each time. "And Mr. Callum locks the door at night." Serena smiled through tears. Callum listened more than he spoke. He learned when to step back and when to stay close. When Serena was finally discharged, Callum arranged an apartment near a park. Not as a rescue, as a bridge. "You don't owe me anything," he told her. "This is just staying." Serena nodded, understanding. Life found a new rhythm: school mornings, therapy appointments, simple dinners. One evening, as they ate together, Lila looked between them thoughtfully. "You stayed," she said to Callum. "And you came back," she said to Serena. Both adults froze. Then Serena reached for Lila's hand. Callum did the same. "Yes," Serena said softly. "Yes," Callum echoed. Lila smiled, satisfied. Outside, the rain fell again, lighter now. But inside there was warmth. Not perfect. Just real. Spring came quietly to Seattle. Not with fireworks, just with softer air and longer afternoons. On a Sunday picnic in the park, Lila ran ahead, Blink tucked under her arm, laughing without checking behind her. Serena watched her cane resting beside the blanket. "She doesn't look back anymore," Serena said. "She doesn't need to," Callum replied. They sat together, not defined by labels but by presence. Later, Lila returned and dropped between them, holding both their hands. "It's funny," she said. "What is?" Serena asked. Lila looked serious. Waiting was hard, but staying is harder. Callum smiled. "Why harder? Because you have to keep choosing it," Lila said. Neither adult spoke. They didn't need to. As the sun dipped behind the trees, Lila leaned back against Serena and yawned. "Mom," she murmured. "Yes, love, you kept your promise." Serena kissed her hair. "I always will." Lila turned to Callum. "And you?" Callum answered without hesitation. "I'm staying." Lila nodded, eyes drifting closed. Satisfied, because in her small, certain world, promises weren't magic. They were choices. And this time everybody chose right. Did this story leave a lasting impression on you? We'd love to hear your thoughts. Leave a comment, rate it from 1 to 10, and tap the end screen to see another heartwarming story waiting for you. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, then tap the bell icon so you don't miss any new stories. Until our next story.